and every day that he will explain everything.
Forgive me just putting on a microphone, I think, for the live stream. Just want to thank my very close friends, Rabbi David Millstone. I call him South Africa's favorite son. We brought him so many times to South Africa. They really appreciated his English sense of humor. And my very special and close friend, Jeremy Kornitz, who is, I call him my boss, who was instrumental in me coming back from South Africa to Israel and having the zchut of making Aliyah a second time and being able to fulfill the role at World Mizrachi. The purpose, when you go through something like this, nothing really prepares you for it. When you walked in and was singing, it was just very emotional for me. I'm normally quite strong, but you don't know what causes what. So thank you for that. Stop singing next time. No, I'm just joking. I want to speak about, I've had many interviews. Our son got married last Tuesday, and we very much wanted to respect their space, and I didn't have any interviews at all until afterwards. All the members of my other son's tank, all of them had been interviewed, and I said I'm going to wait till the day afterwards just to give them their space and it's new to build their bait, Ne'eman B'Yisrael B'ezrat Hashem, and then an opportunity just to try and share our very harrowing experiences, both happy and sad and difficult, because I think we all know that Hashem puts us in situations, whatever situation we put in, the only free choice we have, as we know, is what to choose in any given situation. The very famous book of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, famously has said, nobody can tell me human beings don't have free choice. He said, I saw in the Shoah people behave like animals, and I saw people behave like angels. I saw people steal other people's piece of their last bread, and I saw other people give away their last piece of bread. No one who has been through the Shoah, like I have, can tell me that you don't have free personal choice to decide what to do in any given situation. And whatever situation you find yourself in life, we're called upon to just to try and be a Kiddush Hashem and to do the best thing you can in every situation. I call this talk The Triumph of Life Over Death. And I wanted to share a few thoughts with you today to just try and gather my thoughts, and we'll have some time perhaps for questions. Just a few thoughts on what we're going through, and I think what the Jewish people are going through. I've had the zchut, as many of you have had, of going to Poland and Lithuania. You've had the additional zchut of having Rabbi Millstone and Jeremy with you. And I've had the zchut of leading, they were really leading it, I was just schlepping along, a number of trips under the Mizrachi banner. And so many people, when you speak to them for the first time before they go to Poland, you never know what to expect. How do you go back to the death camps? How can you go back to the place of the greatest Jewish and human suffering in history? How can you do that? You're going to the largest graveyard in world and Jewish history. Many rabbis for many years said not to go, supporting the economy, and for what? For 30 years, nobody could go back to Poland. It was this Vayidom Aharon. Why would you want to go back to this horrific place of death and destruction? Yet I think it turned in the 80s and then late in the 90s, and now it's almost, how can you not go to Poland? How can you not go to Poland? Because somehow, with the perspective of the Jewish people rebuilding themselves and rebuilding a state in Israel and rebuilding the Torah world, Nothing can bring back those people who were the murder and the torture and the death and destruction and the suffering. Nothing can bring it back. But also, Hashem has blessed the Jewish people that nobody can take away from us our decision to live and to rebuild. It's impossible that 3 years after the Shoah, we built a state. How can that be? That should never happen. The Shoah should never happen, and the state should never happen 3 years later. How can it happen after the decimation of all the Hasidic courts and life and the yeshivot that the Jewish people have managed to rebuild our life in Israel and around the world in the most incredible way? And somehow, until you've been to Poland and Lithuania, which is so daunting in the beginning, and people say they don't want to go back, somehow when you go there for some reason that you can't always rationally explain, you come out with you mentioned the French, joie de vivre. You come out with a love of life. You go to the greatest death pits in the history of humanity, the depravity of humanity, and you somehow come out inspired. Wow, it's a privilege to be a Jew. It's a privilege to be part of such a people who can pick themselves up, dust themselves off, never undermine the suffering, but somehow rebuild. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Jewish history doesn't make sense. But yet here we are, surviving and thriving. And for me, what going back to Poland and Lithuania has done, and I urge all of those who haven't yet been to come, I think we're leading a trip in a while, I don't know when it is, whenever it's going to be. Not with us necessarily, with them, not with us, but and whoever you can go with. There's so many incredible people who take trips to Poland and Lithuania. Because to go there is to connect with what it means to be a Jew. The suffering that we have been through as a people is unparalleled. But so is our ability to rebuild. The thing which I go around all the time with is the story of Pesach, which is Matchil Begnut, Umsayem B'Shvach. What is the story of Pesach? What is the story we tell? What's the story we tell to our children? We tell our children that life is not a bed of roses. You have to eat the maror. If you haven't said the words Avadim hayinu leparo b'Mitzrayim, then you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. Boy, shver zu sein a Yid, it's not easy. Life is not easy, and to be a Jew is not easy. There's maror, there's suffering, there's avdut. It's really, really challenging. But that does not define us. It's part of the story, but it's not the story. You have to eat the maror, al matzot umarim yochlu, but you eat it with the Pesach, with the taste of freedom in your mouth. There's pain. There's enormous pain, but it doesn't define. I haven't felt the last 3 weeks have been 3 weeks of pain. I haven't felt that. There's always been pain, and there still is pain, and we hope the pain will end, not only for our family, for the 222 soldiers and civilians who are either nedarim or chatufim, for the 1,400 which have been brutally murdered, as we know, in unspeakable ways, and for the 3,000 injured, and of course, for all those going into battle, which is all of us, 450,000. I think it's the biggest standing army today in the United States at the moment, because our army is us. The army is the Jewish people, and every single family has somebody, and Hashem should look after every single one. Matchil begnut. There are tears, and there's pain, and there's suffering. But that's not who we are. We're not a victimhood people. We're not a people defined by our pain. We're people who grow through our pain. And yes, there's unspeakable suffering in Egypt, but you know what? We came out of Egypt, as it's well known in Hebrew, Avarnet Paro, And we had 210 horrific years with Paro, but we got through it. And then we tasted the taste of freedom, and we received the Torah, and we went into the land of Israel. And therefore, the Jewish story is one of Maror, but that's not the story. That's not the story. It's part of the story, but it's not the story. And I think when you go to the Shoah, where you go and revisit the horrific pain and suffering of the Shoah, what you see is not only the life that was destroyed, but the life that's been rebuilt. We can go into the place where the yellow Magen David was the Magen David of such degradation and worthlessness of Jewish blood, with an Israeli flag, which is the great sign of dignity of the Jewish people. And we can sing, and we can celebrate, and we can return to Israel and can rebuild our lives. There is pain and tears, but that's not who we are. It's part of our story, but it's not the story itself. I was visited yesterday by a friend of mine who comes to give me chizuk. His name is Rabbi Shmuel Slotki, who two of his sons were both civilians in Beersheba. And when they heard what was going on from people fleeing the south, they both put on the uniform, two brothers, Noam and Shai. Shai is married to a girl from Yad Binyamin, from the Millis family. And they both went and with handguns alone and defended Alumim. They were both unfortunately killed. And he comes to me just to give me a hug and to give me chizuk. He's in the army himself. He's got 3 other sons in the army. Mika Amcha Yisrael Goy Echad Ba'aretz. There is no people like the Jewish people. And Netzach Yisrael Lo Yishaker. I'll just briefly share our story if you haven't yet heard it. And again, the craziness of Jewish history today is that our story is like actually a relatively, I don't want to say the word good story, because but it's mild compared to the crazy times. Their families have been destroyed, entire families. Their families have been tortured to no end. There's children which don't have either parents of theirs. There's so much pain and suffering. There's 222 other hostages and missing. And as we said, so much more. But our story is one of mixed emotions. And our oldest son, Yonatan, who was at home with his fiancée with us in Yad Binyamin, is an officer in the paratroopers, the Mempe. Like so many of our sons and brothers and sisters here, everyone's got soldiers and everyone's got almost officers, especially in the Datilomi world, almost isn't a family with our Mesirat Nefesh for the Jewish people, that there aren't people aiming to lead. And he was with his fiancée, and at about 8 o'clock in the morning, since 6:30, we had been in the air raid shelter. It was unusual that there were so many rockets, but no one thought it was going on. At 8 o'clock, his phone starts pinging and pinging and pinging, which is always on Shabbat as an officer, but he never looks at it. And this one was more than usual, and he looked at his phone, and he saw he's on a group of 120 company commanders who he was in a course with. And all of them, it's pinging and pinging. He says something's wrong. He goes onto his phone and he sees the Hebrew word hazui, which means crazy. Hazui, hazui, 100 of them, crazy, crazy. And he goes up to see what's so crazy, that first image of a minivan of people with guns. And the first thing he says, they couldn't have come from Gaza. Everyone knows that Gaza, a bird can't flap its wings past the fence. He's trying to think, what is this? And then he sees on a WhatsApp group with his commanding officer, battalion commander, says to him, anyone who can should come to Sderot. And he gets up, he's going to Sderot, and said, just easy, Tiger, easy. That doesn't sound like, no one thinks that there's any, no one could imagine what's going on. I said, where are you going? I said, firstly, you're on a base of new recruits. Secondly, you got your fiancé, you're getting married in 9 days, Bezrat Hashem. That's not a command. None of us thought what was going on. I said, why don't you phone your commanding officer and ask him, what does it mean, come to Sderot? He sent it to 40 officers. So he phones him and he says to him, Boom, puts the phone down. First he said, if you've got a weapon, you don't. You've got a handgun. He left his gun in the base, which he never does because it was Simchat Torah, and then he was going to do Hakafot Shniot and take his fiancée, our daughter-in-law now, which we're very happy about, to Saad where they live, and then go back to the base. I said, you're going to go with a handgun, with Rambo. You're going with a handgun. And he said, he doesn't say you have to go. He said, Dad, if an officer says I've got a weapon, I go, I'm going. So we couldn't stop him. I just said, just at least just drive safely. He zooted out of Yad Binyamin. He phoned us at 4:30 in the afternoon, phoning. It's Shabbat, so he didn't answer the phone. It wasn't from his number as well. After about 20 different calls from different numbers, I said, clearly something's happening. None of us knew what was going on. He says, Dad, I've been shot in the leg. I'm okay. When any parent, when your kid says, I'm okay, you fear for the worst. He sounded okay. He said, I'm okay. They're going to take me in for checks now. You have no idea what is going on here. He said, I'm worried about Galia's parents. They live inside. He didn't know they didn't. He said, you have no idea. I said, I just fought outside Kfar Aza and passed side. I can't describe to you what's going on. I can't describe it. And then he said to me also that her brother, who's their shadchan, my daughter-in-law, the shadchan with my brother and my son Yonatan, and Galia is her brother, who is what's called a deputy battalion commander in Tzamchanim, Samgad, who was in the army with my son and liked him, and his wife saw him and liked him and said, he's for Galia. So he's their shadchan. He said, Dad, I just heard that they shot down two helicopters, and I know that Neria was in one of them. So I had this thing saying, thank God he's okay, but we're going to wake up. Shabbos is going to come out in 3 hours, and she might, God forbid, hear that her parents, God forbid, 1,000,000 times, the Landau family, incredible people, and her brother. And she said, we were singing songs. I didn't say anything. And she said, I can't wait for Shabbat to come out. And I just said, boy, oh boy, do you want to wait until Shabbos comes out? Hopefully it never comes out. But luckily, she phoned afterwards, and thank God, everyone is fine, and we hope and pray that they like 200,000 others homeless. What does fine mean? Israel? You're homeless, and you're wandering around Israel somewhere. They're up in the north at the moment. But thankfully, nothing happened to them. And we went after Shabbos, and thank God, the bullet went through his leg. Now, my son, like so many Israeli soldiers and officers, they're all so humble, they don't say anything. It's only when he's commanding officer, the turning point for me was when there's a video about a rabbi called Rabbi Weitzen. He was a rabbi of mine in Beit El. I studied in Yeshivat Beit El, and he's the rabbi of Psagot. And there's an incredible video that he sent out. His son had been killed in Kerem Shalom, and I heard this 3-minute clip, and I could have never said the things he said. And it gave me it was on the Wednesday, I all of a sudden felt, wow, maybe I can come out of myself if somebody can see this. And then when Yonatan's commanding officer came on that Wednesday afternoon, and he told us the story, I just cried and I said, what a miracle Hashem has done for us. This boy could have been killed 10 times over. He could have been injured so much worse. And at that moment, having heard Rabbi Weitzen, which allowed me to just step out of myself and just see something broader. And secondly, to hear that Hashem had spared Yonatan. And I won't go through the whole story now because I want to talk about some other points, but he was shot through the leg. He fought for 5 hours in gun battles nonstop, where they didn't know what they were doing. The only people in the area were special forces, which are trained for this, like Seret Matkal and others, and officers like my son, whose senior officer said to them, come. Nobody knew what was going on. There were 2 generals in the beginning with him, and then one went somewhere else, one called Yisrael Ziv. This is my son, a young officer fighting with a general and actually commanding, because my son was the only one who knew the base. And the other general went to save his, somebody called Tivon, he went to save there's pictures of it going into the kibbutz Nachal Oz, where he saved his children and grandchildren. My son was sent after all of these gun battles. I mean, the jeep in front of him was hit by an RPG, and the deputy commander of Maglan Special Forces and 2 officers, one who was in officer's course with him, were killed. And opening doors, shooting on all sides, an RPG went over their head. He didn't have proper weapon, so his weapon jammed in the middle. He took his friend's weapon, who was shot in the stomach, and took his gun, and took the vest, and took a helmet from someone from Seret Matkal. And this was everybody. My son was just like everyone fighting to defend their fellow civilians. And when he came to Nachal Oz, they sent him to the base Nachal Oz. This is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. things started in Nachalos at 7. And they were the first soldiers to come to Nachalos. No one else had been there. Nachalos is a base. And he said to me when he phoned me in the hospital, he said to me, Dad, I saw that Daniel's tank, my younger son Daniel, the one who's missing in action, he's a tank commander, and his tank is stationed in Nachalos. It just happened to be that they fought close to each other. And when he went through the tank shed, he said, I know where his tank is parked. I've visited him many times, and his tank and other tanks are not there, which we thought is a good sign. But that's what we thought. And Yonatan, because he knew the base Nachalos, he led the soldiers in, and they managed, and this is tremendous schut, something Rabbi Doron talks about, saved 25 chayalot, tatzpitaniot, who were all hiding. So we all know, kol ha'metzil nefesh echat Mishrael. If you save one fellow human being and one Jew, you've saved an entire world. And those are generations, please God, to come. And that's what Rabbi Doron said in this video, which again just allowed me to just step out of myself. And during that battle, they killed many terrorists. But 2 hours into 2:45, he was shot in the leg in an ambush in the base. The soldier next to him was shot in the back and in the leg, and the one on the other side was shot in the stomach. Thank God they're all okay. So when I heard the stories from his mafaked, who fought shoulder to shoulder with him, I came out of that and I just looked up and I said, Hashem, thank you so much. I know that this could have ended differently. I've got a friend who's buried 2 sons, and there's families which have been destroyed. And to have a son who is only shot through the leg, and it only, thank God, missed everything. It missed all the main arteries. If you don't put a tourniquet on in 90 seconds, you can bleed to death. It took them hours to get to the hospital, which is a whole story which we don't have time for. So thankfully, he's alive. Thankfully, he's only relatively lightly injured. And then our other son, Daniel, has been missing since, by the next day, 24 hours later, we said, like, how long can you spend in a tank? And by the next day, we really started to be concerned because there was no connection. My son found out through unofficial sources, because he fought in that area, that their tank had been hit, and that there was 1 dead in the tank, and 3 which were not in the tank. But we didn't want to say anything to anyone because we didn't know. It's unofficial. The army came to us on Thursday morning to my son's tzevet. It's called the crew of the tank. They came to one family in Haifa, one in Tel Aviv, one in Netanya, and one in us, all at the same time, and basically told us, that he is missing in action. He's not amongst the dead that Israel has, not amongst the wounded, and he's not confirmed to be hijacked to be kidnapped because there's no evidence of that. I mean, yes, there's circumstantial, but nobody saw it. There's no electronic evidence yet, and there's no cameras. Once we heard that, as strange as it seems, it actually gave my wife and I and my son a bit of headspace to make a rational decision. Yonatan, you're supposed to be getting married on Tuesday. What should we do? It's Thursday now. And my wife, I don't know where she got the strength from. She said, I really think it's the right thing for the 2 of you to get married, because I know there's a religious couple, a Torani Chevra. He's going to go back into the army at some point. What are you waiting for? She said, if you just want to do a chuppah, whatever you want, but of course it's your decision. And they said, are you sure? I said, we're sure that we want to do whatever you want to do. But what do you think, Dad? I said, we don't have an opinion. You want to know our opinion? We're happy for you to get married, but that's not doesn't matter what we think. But we're okay. We spoke to the Mechutanim. They said, whatever the couple wants. Thursday afternoon, my son said to me, he said the same thing to me under the chuppah. He said, Dad, they were very, very close, the 2 brothers, very different, very, very different. But since the Aliyah and since being in the army together, they become really inseparable. He would have been his best man at the wedding. He said to me, and this is the first thing he said in the chuppah, he said, Dad, there was no scenario in my life that I ever envisaged standing under chuppah without my brother. But now that we all know that probably there isn't going to be a change in his status for a while, Galia and I, if you are supportive, are we're prepared to go along with the wedding. And of course, we said absolutely. The ladies of our Yishuv Yad Binyamin, it's unbelievable. All the chesed that we've seen is just unbelievable, all of us. They put a wedding together in our yeshiva high school. We canceled the hall in Ashkelon. We had to have only minimal people, so that's why we had to put it on live stream. And we were somehow, people say, where the kohort from? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't even feel, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But thankfully, he got married. It was very, very special. Jeremy was there. It was very, very special. And there were sad moments when the rabbi, who's a very close friend of ours, Rabbi Merzbach, mentioned that he was very tearful, and he said, in the beginning of the chuppah, he said, there's one person who's not here, and we have to acknowledge the lack of presence of Daniel, and we all davened for him. That was a very, very hard moment, but you know what? We were able to wipe our faces. It's a simcha. And yes, one or two of the family photos were very difficult. And seeing one or two people for the first time was difficult, but it was a simcha. And a friend of ours said to us, she said, I've been to many chuppahs in my life, maybe thousands. She says, this was the holiest, saddest, happiest chuppah I was ever at. And we had an unbelievable chuppah, thank God. We don't yet know Daniel's fate. It does seem that he's been kidnapped. That does seem to be the fate. A senior commander came to speak to us and took us through the battle. They've listened to all of the recordings. He was in the tank for 2 hours, and I'm not going to go into any detail about it, but he fought like an absolute hero and saved many, many lives. In fact, my mechutanim said, the place that he fought in is exactly where terrorists would have come in to Kfar Aza and to Sidon. They didn't get to Sidon. And mi yodea, if it's not him and his tank, which, like I said, for various reasons, I can't go into detail, which prevented many, many terrorists doing so much more and even going to kibbutz side. So that's our story, and I just want to share with you a number of thoughts, if I may. Number one, we are part of an unbelievable people. The gvura and the heroism, the Mesirat Nefesh of Ahava, of people who got up, didn't have to, like the Slotki boys, Shai and Noam, and my sons and so many others. Well, my son had to, he's a soldier, and the other one's also a soldier, but the civilians and the soldiers and the people and the unbelievable gvura at a time when we were taken by surprise is just, the Mesirat Nefesh of love and Ahava is unbelievable. And the first thought that I want to share with you is this, or maybe three thoughts. Number one, the reason why we will prevail is because life is always stronger than death. The Jewish people are a life-affirming people. When we drink a l'chaim, we've done a few of those, Jeremy will do a few more, we say, l'chaim, l'chaim. Thought to myself, what did we daven over the Amim Noraim? Of course, the main theme of the Amim Noraim is Malchuyot, is kingship, but there's another theme, Zochreinu l'chaim, Uchtov l'chaim tovim, the Sefer HaChaim. Chaim is a tremendous theme of what it means to be a Jew, Kiddush HaChaim. And we believe in life. We are a life-affirming people. We're a life-affirming people against a society which praises death, which will kill, maim, and destroy life of the enemy and of their own, will make sure that their own are put in harm's way, daven that their own get shot by missiles, especially babies and especially hospitals and especially elderly, because if you have no respect for human life, then you won't have respect for human life in your own society. And here is an enemy which praises death, and we're part of a people which celebrates life. It dawned on me that Rabbi Yehuda Levi in the Kuzari says, how do we understand tum'ah, the concept of spiritual impurity? And he says the organizing principle of tahara and tum'ah is a lack of life, death. What is avi avot tum'ah? What in Judaism is the thing which causes the most contamination? Why it's a question whether you can go to places on the Temple Mount while we're impure, why Kohanim can't be close to dead bodies, why all of us in a state have to be, to be conscious. Less so without the Beit HaMikdash, which should soon be rebuilt, but this concept of tum'ah. What is the most spiritually contaminating thing that there is? A corpse. Avi havota tum'ah. If there was life and life is lost, even if the neshama is in Olam Haba. That's another world. In our world, the greatest source of spiritual impurity is the loss of life. We bury the dead straight away and give them kavod. We don't want to be around tumah. We want to be around tahara. We have enormous respect. But for me, to be part of the Jewish people is to be part of a people which celebrates life. And we all know that that's what Jews have always done. Jews got married in the Shoah. Jews also, in Mitzrayim, there's the very famous Midrash where Yocheved Bat Levi goes to Amram and says, why don't you want to bring children into the world? And he says, because this is a world you want to bring children into. Have you seen what's going on around you? A world where they're killing the firstborn. Is this the world you want to bring children into? And she says to him, according to the Midrash, you're worse than Pharaoh. Pharaoh is killing the boys. You denying even girls to be born. What happens if we have a boy? What happens if we have a girl? What, you're just gonna give in? Life has to go on. And Chazal is saying to us that is the Jewish DNA. And therefore, the decision to have the wedding, which I don't even feel was a decision, it just made itself, was the affirmation of life, because that is what we do as Jews. I don't know where the strength, I don't even know, as I say, it doesn't even seem like to us a courageous decision. It just seems that I almost feel the decision made itself, and that's what Jews do. That's what my son said. He said to the rabbi, you sure you want to go ahead? And he said to the rabbi, they've tried to take away everything from us. My own brother is missing in action. They've taken away so much, and they're not going to take away the Jewish future to build and to have simcha. And I think that I could expound on that, but I'm going to leave it at that point. Number one, there's lots more to add to that, but I really feel that it's a zchut to be part of a people which prioritize simcha. I will maybe just say one thing I sent out of the chuppah. We'll send you a clip. Yonatan's commander who came to the wedding. We've become very, very close. Just to show you what it is, he's now put in a special request to leave the new recruits to go into Gaza. He's pleading with the army to let him leave the new recruits and go into Gaza, and that's probably what's going to happen. And we've got a little clip from the wedding afterwards. I asked him to come, and we've become very close, of course. And my son's alive. It's partly because of him. And I put my arm around him and said a few words in English. And I said to him, it's not so clear. Can I take that from the wedding and send it? I want to put English and Hebrew subtitles to give people chizuk. He said to me, he's a traditional guy who lives in Tel Aviv. He says, Doron, ma shetov la'am Yisrael, tov li. And I said, okay. So the clip's been going around a bit. And one of my daughter-in-law's cousins works with his mother. And she phoned my son, wow, Toda Rabba, Yonatan. And he showed me the FaceTime with her today. That's Am Yisrael, mi kamcha Yisrael go yechad ba'aretz. So that's the belief in life, and we go on. But when I had my hand around him, I said there under the chuppah, after the chuppah, the following thing. We all know there's a bracha that we say, the Sheva brachot, the seventh one. We say, Od yishama ba'arei Yehuda v'chutzot Yerushalayim. It will be heard again in the streets of Jerusalem and the cities of Judah. Kol sason v'kol simcha. That's the seventh Sheva bracha. It's not as well known that it comes from an explicit verse in Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, who says, this is the Naviya Churban. This is the person known in history to write the book of Eicha, to be the master of predicting the worst and living through the worst for the Jewish people. And the same Yirmiyahu says in chapter 33, he says, Od yishama b'makom hazeh, in this place, asher atem omrim charevu, that has been destroyed, she'ein behema ve'ein ish, there's nobody left in this place that I predict will be destroyed. B'chutzot Yerushalayim v'arei Yehuda. He says, in this place, kol sason v'kol simcha, kol chatan v'kol kala. And that's Jewish history. The same person who foresaw the destruction of Yerushalayim is the same person who said, it's not the story, it's only part of the story. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second point, a lot of people have asked me, and again, I don't know how, I think these things just happen themselves, is how are you able to be genuinely happy and incredibly concerned and sad at the same time? How can you celebrate with one son, knowing, God forbid, what's happening with another son? I said, I don't know. I just know that in the laboratory of life, things happen that the mind can't always understand. Things often don't make sense rationally. All of Jewish existence doesn't make sense rationally, but it happened. Sometimes, but it happened. So it doesn't make sense, but it happened. I don't know. But I can just say that I have seen that it is possible to hold conflicting thoughts at the same time, and to celebrate and to be incredibly concerned at the same time. That day that Roiza Batani, my son's commander, came to tell us what was going on with Yonatan, I came out of that hour and a half with Batechirach, it says about Yaakov, Batechirach Yaakov. I somehow felt after 3 days I could actually come out of myself, thanks to Rabbi Weitzen, try and look broader, and thanks to Roiza Batani to be able to feel immense gratitude. There isn't a moment that I don't feel immense gratitude. This is for me. I'm saying for me. Everyone, my wife in many ways has been stronger than me. I think it's la'ein aruch harder for a mother. It's hard for a brother. It's hard for my parents. It's hard for my wife, and she's been unbelievably heroic. And we somehow were able, I feel every single day since then, such enormous gratitude to Hashem. And that isn't in place of the pain. It's not. I can at the same time feel like, Hashem, what happened here? And what's going on, and God knows where our son is. And, I've had a pit in my stomach from then, which just doesn't go away. It's there, and there's anxiety and there's concern, but it doesn't take away the happiness and the gratitude. And I have seen that it is possible. And again, I think our story it's very painful, but when you look at what people are dealing with in this crazy world, people are dealing with much worse. And it's possible. And I just want to share with you a few sources. One of the first thoughts I shared in the first radio interview was, we just read Kohelet, and in Kohelet in Ecclesiastes, he says in chapter 3 famously, L'chol zman va'et tachat hashamayim, right? In all times, there's always a time for everything. There's a time for life. There's a time for death. There's a time for livkot va'et lischot. There's a time for crying, and there's a time for celebration. There's a time for this, there's a time to all types of different things. And you know what I saw? I saw that those times often are exactly the same time. And therefore, what is Shlomo HaMelech saying? He's saying that all the time these things are going on in your life. But what's the chokhmah of Shlomo? You just got to know which one to put in a box and which one to bring out. L'chol zman va'et tachat hashamayim. Who doesn't in their life have loss? Who doesn't have happiness? Who doesn't have concerns for their children, concerns for their future? Who doesn't have pain in their life? And who doesn't have joy? The chokhmah is knowing just when to put the pain in a box and say that's where it is, and the happiness, and put sometimes the happiness in a box when one has to. And I have seen that it is possible to have all of these at the same time and just know which one to open. Rabbi Hauer, who's the executive vice president of the OU, came to see us, and he told me a beautiful word, and I want to share it with you. He said, there's a famous question when the angels were singing at Kriyat Yam Suf, as the Gemara famously says, Ma'aseh adai tuim bayam. My creatures are, even if they deserve death, and even if the Egyptians were not moral, so many creatures are dying, and you singing praises. Jews don't sing when other people die. Other societies do that. That's not the Jewish way. And even if it's our arch enemy, it doesn't matter what they've done to us. We don't celebrate the death of other people. That's not the Jewish way. He said, how can you sing as angels when my creatures have died? And even if they deserve death, there's been a lack of blood, there's been death. That's just tumah. And they didn't sing. But then he quoted Rabbi Shimon Schwab, who says, why wasn't the same question, it's a famous question, posed to the Jews? We sang, Az Yashir Moshe Ovanei, there's all these people, we're almost celebrating. So many people have been killed and you're singing songs. Why was the question not posed to Jewish people? Says Rabbi Schwab, he says, you know why? Because human beings are not angels. Angels have one-dimensional. An angel can either sing or it can grieve. It can't do both. Human beings have to know how to sing for with Hakarat Tov, and know how to hold at the same time the pain of death. And that's who we are. Rav Soloveitchik famously says, we daven Hallel, Hallel, and we thank Hashem, and in the middle of Hallel, all of a sudden, after thanking, we say, Anna Hashem Hashanah. Give us a break. Can we not even thank Hashem without saying, Hashem, help us? Hashem, help us. We're busy saying Hallel. That's Jewish life, said Rav Soloveitchik. Once we're praising, things are perfect. There's so much to daven for. And I could go on and on with that, but I think you get the idea. I just want to share with you one just final thought on this thought, and that is, for many, many years, I've struggled with when you say to somebody, how are you? Sometimes people would say, you ask them, how are you? Say, how are you doing? I call Beseder, and people say, no, I call Lo Beseder. I Rov Beseder. I never identified with that, because I don't think when somebody says, how are you doing, the question is, can you just give me a synopsis of everything going on and tell me? Obviously, everything's not. In whose life is everything okay? Show me one human being. Everyone's got pain. And everyone's got happiness. And everyone's got things. When a person says, how are you? When you say, Hakol Beseder, the saying is, spiritually, everything is okay. We live in God's world. And in God's world, everything is okay. And if you ask me how I am, I say, Baruch Hashem, Hakol Beseder. Of course, everything's not right. But that's not the question. If you live in God's world, then everything is okay in God's world. Because that's the world we live in. And what I've realized from this, as painful and difficult as it is, it's just really an extrapolation of an existential reality that we all deal with. Every day, when somebody asks you how you are, and with every fiber in your being, you want to say, so much is terrible. When you're saying to another person, I call Beseder, you're saying, I'm okay, we live in God's world, and everything is okay, even though so much isn't. It's a qualitative thing, and that's what Hakol, the Ramban, says in Avraham when he says, Hashem Berech Avraham, Bakol, says the Ramban. Bakol is a unique spiritual quality where everything of people who are connected to God is always okay, even when they are not. And I want to share one final thought with you, I think. If you're lucky, it'll be one. If you're unlucky, it'll be two. Let me just see. Okay, I'll share one other one. Well, okay, I can't resist. It's a thought on the first thought that I said. So the first point I wanted to make is life will prevail over death. That's the Jewish way. Hope over despair. The second point is that it is possible to hold different things and feel each one without the one cancelling out the other one. And Hakol, everything is always okay, even if it's not. I will share with you that one of the most profound things I ever read in my life was a book by a man called M. Scott Peck, a psychiatrist who saw thousands of people. It's called The Road Less Traveled. I bought this book, I opened it up, I read the first paragraph, and I closed it. I said, I don't need to read anymore. If I bought this book for that paragraph, it's worth it. I have read more, but I didn't need to. He says like this, life is difficult. Life is very difficult. But when you accept that life is difficult, it's not so difficult. People cause themselves pain because they expect life to be a walk in the park. Life is difficult compared to what? When you walk around thinking that everything's supposed to be okay, and everyone's supposed to just be healthy, and God's supposed to do all kinds. When that's your mindset, that magielcha, that you deserve, that's another word. There's no such thing as deserving. What do you people say deserve? What does even deserve mean? We think we deserve. I don't know what the word deserve means. We walk around thinking that God owes us and everything's going to be okay. One thing I've learned in life is you've got to free yourself of expectation. Don't expect anything. Not in a positive way. The only thing we've got is this moment. And is life difficult? Yes. But the moment you accept that and just live life, it's unbelievable. And that's the challenge, is this. There's no way I find, I'm only 16, 17 days into this, and we hope and pray that it ends. There's no way you can live life thinking forward. What does the future hold? I can't even go there. The only way is to think of the present, and that is to try to do your best in any given time. And I just want to say about the captives. I just finished writing an article in the car as I came up. It's in our Mizrachi Weekly, where I just wanted to say this, the one tovana insight that has become clear to me is this. Do you want to see the hallmark of a society? Look at hostages and captives. Why did Hashem destroy the world? Because the word Enoch uses, Vatimele haaretz, Hamas. Interesting, the word Hamas. What does the word Hamas mean? Rashi proves from a pasuk in Yonah that it means robbery. People stole. Is that enough? Just everyone's stealing? I mean, that's terrible. You destroy the world now. Says the Targum Onkelos, what did they steal? He says the word Chatufim. They stole other people. When a society has no respect for the basic right to life and liberty of an individual in society, that regime has no right to exist. When you live in a world that there's not only no respect for property, there's no respect for human life. And what's the hallmark of lack of respect for human life? Yeah. It says, Vaikhu. It says, I noticed this morning in this week's parasha, it says regarding Lot, it says, Vaikhu ve'elchu. Yeah, twice, Vaikhu ve'elchu. You just go in and take people and go as if you have breakfast and for lunch, just take somebody captive. What is this? And therefore, what was Abraham's response? Abraham's response was to endanger everything to save one errant fellow family member. A family member made a bad mistake of living amongst the Sodomites. A family member who didn't deserve, I don't know what the word deserve means, Abraham's chesed, and Abraham doesn't think for a minute, and he creates in the DNA of the Jewish people. God didn't tell him to do this. He said, if a fellow family member and Jew has been taken captive, I will take all 318 of my men. I will sacrifice, if I have to, my life for an errant fellow Jew. And it calls him ach the whole time. He's not my nephew, he's my ach. And that's what it means to be a Jew. We do everything in our power to celebrate life, to protect life in every possible way against a regime which lives in a parallel universe, which everything is about disrespecting life and celebrating death. And the hallmark of that is just take people, go into their living room and take a baby and take a grandmother, because that's what we do. A society like that and a regime like that has no moral basis to exist as a society based on the Hamas regime. And this war, Bezrat Hashem, will be about routing out such celebration of death in order for there to be a new tomorrow, to rout out the regime of Hamas, which has shown us what it's capable of. My final thought for you is this. What can we do? The thought which I've been thinking a lot about is on Unatana Tokev. I thought, did Hashem answer our prayers or not? My wife said, I daven so hard for our children. It's one thing to make aliyah. It's another thing to have sons in the army. It's another thing to have sons who are officers. It's another thing to have sons who are signing on in the army. And I said, Hashem answered our prayers. He answered our prayer with Yonatan. Who knows what would have been had we not prayed? And Daniel, Bezrat Hashem, will still answer our prayers. And we all said, U'tshuva, u'tfilah, u'tzedakah, ma'avirin ra'gzera. One word in tshuva, one in tefillah, one in tzedakah. I think the biggest tshuva that Am Yisrael needs at the moment is a tshuva of Ahavat Yisrael. Ahavat Yisrael has suffered so much. I was one who always felt that what's it going to take in this country and in the world for this train smash about to happen and no one stepping down? I don't want to get in who's right, who's wrong. It's irrelevant because everybody thinks they're right. Ultimately, what is going to stop the world and the Jewish people, the Jewish world, who just on this collision course for years with all the elections in the last 9 months? We always knew it was going to be something crazy. None of us thought it would be this. We all need to do tshuva in Ahavat Yisrael, in this what's called tzadkanut, that we think we're right. Too much arrogance. Everyone's convinced that they're right. And what this has done for me, the tshuva is, the Arizal says before you daven, you've got to say, Hareini Muchanim Zuman, you've got to take upon yourself mitzvat Ahavat Yisrael. And the amount of people that have come to us from all walks of life, which I don't have time to go into now, I want to finish, it's been unbelievable. And unfortunately, through this terrible, terrible pain, the result, for some reason, that happened through this way, has been an achdut that the Jewish people have not had for a while. And we all need to do tshuva. It cannot be that after this, we go back to all the finger pointing. I always say there's going to be we can all write out now who's going to point fingers at who. If we're going to go back to how it was, we all know who's going to point at who. We can't do that anymore. We have to do tshuva of Ahavat Yisrael. There has to be consensus for everything. And even the national inquiry that will happen has to be a national inquiry which is pure of any agendas. It has to be everything in this country and in the Jewish world now has to happen through this Brit Goral of consensus. And that has to be, because if we go back to what was, then that's, and that's the tshuva I believe we all need to do. Secondly, tefillah. We all know that Hashem says, He says, Mi goy gadol, who is like the Jewish people. Asher Elokim krovim elav. Hashem is close to us. B'chol korein elav. When we stand together and daven as one, I know our family has felt such unbelievable love and chibuk, and people all around the world davening for Daniel, Shimon, Ben Sharon, and all the missing captives and all those who need our tefillot. But tefillah is the super secret power of, in general, and of the Jewish people. And we all need to daven from the depths of our hearts. And we all know that it says, Kol avakesh rachamim, Whoever asks for rachamim for somebody else, na tchila. If you daven for somebody else, you get answered first. Not because it's a spiritual formula, just daven for somebody else, then Hashem will look after you, tit for tat. No. If you genuinely have concern for your fellow Jew, if you genuinely have concern for others, if you open your heart to others and you become one, then everybody will be answered. Hashem will answer your prayers and their prayers because you've become one. And that is an unbelievable opportunity. We have to stand together. And finally, tzedakah. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs Zatzal says that tzedakah is not charity. I don't know what charity means in English. I don't know what the word charity means. Tzedakah is something like justice in society, social justice. It's when people say, I'm going to give all of my resources, my money, and everything I've got to make society better. Look what's happened in our societies. And look at the chesed. In Yad Binyamin alone, we've got all the youth that just, Yad Binyamin is on the way down south, and therefore tens of thousands of soldiers are coming. Everyone's working around the clock to provide for them all types of things. The same people who are involved in the protest are now working with tens of thousands of people to support families in the south and more. That is tzedakah. It's a society which is dedicated to good things. And I just want to say to all of you who've stayed in Israel, a massive, massive yishar koach. I do not believe there is a safer place right now in the world than the state of Israel. I'll repeat that. I do not believe there is a safer place in the world right now than the state of Israel. This is the beginning of the war. We are one people. And wherever Jews are, unfortunately and fortunately, we all seen as the same. The safest place in the world is the state of Israel right now. And I don't believe that's a reason to stay. I didn't come to Israel because it's a safe place. We come from South Africa. It's not the safest place in the world. We made Aliyah in Tzuk and on the first day we were here, there were missiles coming from Gaza. And my daughter of 10 is lying in her bed and says, Dad, wasn't South Africa the country which was dangerous? I don't recall anyone sending missiles to kill us in our homes. And then she says, why are they trying to kill us? Like, what did we do? Of course, we did nothing. We just returned to our homeland and want to live in peace, and the other side doesn't. And I want to say that those of you who stayed at Big Yishar Koach, those who went home, it's understandable. One thing as Jews we're told to do, you never judge somebody else. Don't dare judge. You don't know what other families are going through. We know that one of the most important principles of Judaism is ladun l'chavsachut. And we need so much of that. That you've decided something doesn't mean you judge somebody else. You don't know what that family's been through. You don't know what they're considered. Don't have the chutzpah to put yourself in someone else's place and judge somebody. If they made that decision, then that decision is right for them. And if families have made the decision that they want their children to be with them, then number one, make sure that you're advocates for the state of Israel now. Do acts of chesed, acts of tefillah, be activists in your community to do everything, because we need Jews and the community everywhere to do what it needs to do. If you want to come back, you're always welcome to come back. But if you're going to stay, get together with your family and do everything possible to look out for the good of the Jewish people, look out for the state of Israel. We're going to need all the Jews around the world and all of our friends on campuses and communities, everywhere, to be advocates, to be part of our destiny, and to stand strong. And I want to say finally that the word tzedakah is also tzedek, righteousness. There has never been in our generation a more righteous war than this, of uprooting a regime which has not only done this to us, but has such disregard for our lives and for their lives. And therefore, we always have respect for human life, and we'll fight as Jews, but we will fight and we will prevail. And we hope and pray that Hashem does it with tremendous rachmanut, because of the unity that we have, because of what we've been through, because of the tremendous togetherness that we have today, the tremendous gvura, the fact that people have put everything on the line to defend their fellow Jews and civilians. And we hope and pray that B'schut not only with our son, Daniel Shimon Ben Sharon, return in good health, and his other people in his tank with him, Itai Ben Chagit and Matan Ben Anat, the other two, and all others of all the 222 hostages and soldiers, and all the Ptsuim should be healed, and all the families which have unfortunately lost and had terrible loss, Hashem should give them comfort. And most importantly, going forward, that Hashem should look after every single one of our sons and daughters, our brothers and parents going into war. That just as Hashem somehow what happened was the most horrific, unexpected, unimaginable surprise and suffering, the worst today in Jewish history since the Shoah. The same Hashem, who is an Kel Rachum V'Chanun, will provide the most incredible, unimaginable victory, just like Abraham Avinu returned unscathed against four of the greatest kings in the world. He went with 318 men in a night raid and came back with all 318 men unscathed. Hashem should, Bezrat Hashem, hear our tefillot. It's a shat ratzon that we should be able to rid the world of the evil of Hamas and at the same time look after every single one of our boys and girls who are there to protect the Jewish life and the Jewish way of life. Thank you very much. I want to give you questions, or if not.
Small questions?
I don't know. Questions or not? For 10 okay.
We have a few minutes for questions. I have to teach someone, so I just want to say one word before you ask any questions. One word.
Rabbinic one word. Yeah.
One word.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you remember, Rabbi Doron, it's something I said in Krakow on Shabbat when we were there last year. By the Pasha of the Meraglim, so the Meraglim come back from touring Eretz Israel, and they give all of these reasons why we shouldn't go to Israel, why we shouldn't go and live in Israel, why we shouldn't enter the land, security reasons, and so on and so forth. The only person to speak out is Khaled. The only person who says anything is Khaled. And Khaled just says, we can do it. He says, Allah na'aleh, we can do it. That's what he says. He doesn't give a strategic retort. He doesn't come back and say, no, we can because of A, B, C, D. He doesn't say that at all. He says, Allah na'aleh. The Eish Kodesh makes a comment on this issue of Allah na'aleh. She's just checking her. On this issue of Allah na'aleh, the Eish Kodesh, and just understand the time the Eish Kodesh. In June 1940, Paris has surrendered. Holland has surrendered. Belgium has surrendered. Western Europe belongs to the Nazis. As far as anyone can see, the war is over. And the Jews are stuck in Warsaw. And the Pieters and Rebbe speaking to the Jews in Warsaw in June 1940. The British have run away. 385 expeditionary forces have run away at Dunkirk. Miraculously been saved. It's the only way the war could even carry on. America hadn't entered the war. And at that time, when absolute yield spreads through Warsaw, the Pietesna asked that question. He says, why is it that Khaled doesn't give an answer, a strategic answer? We can win because X, Y, Z. And the Pietesna Rebbe says, and he didn't survive, the Pietesna Rebbe says, because that is the Jewish answer, is Allah na'aleh. It's not to do with strategy. It's not to do with logic. We've been exposed to something that we know exists. On this occasion, they happen to succeed to a degree. We know it exists. We're surrounded by people who don't want us. You just have to open up social media to see it's not just our neighbors. It's in London. It's in Paris. It's in Belgium. It's in Harvard University. It's all over the place. So it's not an issue of logic here. And when we look at our Noach.
I'm not handle it. Feel free to ask. Also feel free not to ask. A lot bigger problems than whether you can ask a question or not. So it's, feel free to ask, and feel free not to wait for a few minutes. If then you want to ask, feel free to. And if not, I'll have extra time for a coffee. Jackie, you want to ask anything? Yes.
Just on behalf of the Midreshet, we just want to thank you so much for coming to speak to us. Such a good to listen to you speak. Thank you so much, Rabbi Perez.
Appreciate it. What's the question? No, so it's a pleasure, but it's thank you. Eileen, ask a nice question.
It's not a question, it's a statement. I think that the way everybody feels is exactly what we're experiencing through this whole thing, which is there's nothing to say. It's just happening to all of us.
Yeah. Well said. I think that ends the question. Oh, we got a question, yes. Oh, we got a question, yeah.
But what is one piece of practical advice that you would give to someone to get through, just someone who's struggling?
One piece of practical advice for somebody who's struggling? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm just struggling through it. I think for me, what I've seen is you hear the Seder, no matter what we're going through, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. That we should obviously seek out the right things. Like I know some people go through, let's say, their mental health issues. It's not yet the Seder if you don't look after it. You've got to get medicine. I've seen this as a community rabbi and in other ways that 1,000 years of therapy doesn't help you if you don't deal with the medical side of it. And you got to deal with the medical side of it and then have therapy. You've got to do whatever it takes. Meaning, I don't mean Yeva Seder as a sort of defeatist, put our faith in Hashem. We put our faith in Hashem, but we need to do what we need to do. So obviously each person, whatever they're going through, they need to do what they need to do. If it's therapy, if it's medicine, if it's support. But to know that if it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I have no idea what the future holds, and I'm trying not to think about it, and I hope and pray. But I just feel very profoundly, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I'm talking about me. I'm not talking about anyone else in our family, or I'm not being presumptuous. I'm just talking about me right now. And again, you might ask me tomorrow, and I might say something different. But right now, I feel that no matter what we go through in life, there's always people who are having it 100 times harder than you. Not that that's comforting, but it is. What I mean, why is it comforting? Because people have got it harder than you, and they're dealing with it, and they're smiling. And the Jewish people has been through such difficult things that people have got it much harder. And therefore, if a person can just do what they need to do, seek advice, you have to do what you need to do. That's to be studied. The person needs to do what they need to do, and they need to seek advice and do whatever they need to do. And then just have him on it, that he ever said it. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. We have the kohot. We live in Hashem's world, not our world. And in Hashem's world, Hakol Beseder, Hakol Yeh Beseder, we live in His world. And somehow, Kol Ma'ad Avad Rahman V'Tava, we don't understand. What does it mean everything that Hashem does, He does for the best? I don't know exactly what that means, but I feel that it means that in Hashem's world, somehow everything is for the good, as hard as it is, and therefore it's ultimately for the good. And we live in a world of a compassionate, purposeful God. As hard as things are, that's what Hashem ever said. Time for another question. Yes. You're also allowed to ask, not from the back, also here. Yes, yes.
As a public face of the Jewish people, I guess this is your question. As a public face of the Jewish people, what do you think has given you, what do you feel has given you the cloth to stand in front of the nation and share your experiences? Have you wanted to shy away?
So as a public face of the Jewish people, I'm not a public face of the Jewish people. I'm a person who plays a leadership role, as many do, and many are much, much, much broader one. I'm one of 222 families, well, probably less because some of them are probably siblings, but there's hundreds of families going through this, and everyone, unfortunately, has been thrust into it. And for me, I'm always trying, like I said in the beginning, you would ask yourself, what's the right thing for you to do? And I just felt that because I'm a person involved in community life, and I'm a rabbi, so we always like speaking. I just felt that I didn't feel it for 3 days. I just couldn't look past my nose the first 3 days. And somehow after 3 days, I just felt that when I could see gratitude and just see things broader, I'll just maybe answer that with what my son's commander said to me. My son's commander, after that hour-and-a-half visit, he said to my son, what are you doing with the wedding? He said, we're not sure. He said to my son, get married tonight. And he's a traditional guy, right? From Tel Aviv. Get married tonight in your uniform with 10. He said, you're the rabbi, you know how it works. Bring a few ADMs just to me, right? Israel needs a simcha. We need smachot. We've got enough problems, right? We need simchas. So I said to him, Kudai, is that a command? Because I know my son won't do that as a command. He said, it's not a command. I said, okay, he's not going to do it then. But here is a commander saying to him, Pashut, what do you mean? So I think that then happened. And I think you just, I don't know. I think you've got to use whatever ability you have and whatever, platform you've been given in an authentic way, to be authentic to who you are. And, so that's what I'm trying to do. Also my number one priority is my family, and I have to, it's the first time I've been to Yerushalayim from Yad Binyamin. I'm working from home. I just want to be around my wife and our children, because things change on a daily basis and sometimes on an hourly basis, and just want to be around and work from there. So for me, number one is what's good for my wife and our family to handle it in the best possible way. But I do play a public role, and I think if one has an ability, people, and also I'm not running after anyone. On the contrary, I I'm not fielding any calls from journalists. I've asked Rabbi Perez, my associate, and a PR company that works for Mizrachi, just to field all the calls and decide what I should do and not do. I said I'm happy to do something in English and Hebrew. Hashem's given me the ability to talk English with a South African accent. Americans, you can't work it out. It's not Australian, it's not English, it's South African. And to be able to, just use whatever ability you have to, to give chizuk and to play a role, number one, in give chizuk, and number two, to be active in hopefully A chizuk, B, putting Israel's case forward as a life-affirming people against the culture of death, and obviously also to do whatever little bit I can to bring about the release of hostages, and amongst them our son. So, yeah, I just sometimes feel decisions make themselves. And you just got to listen to what you feel is right, speak to people close to you, and just make sure that what you're doing is authentic and it's right. And one last question we want to finish by 4, I think. And ask you all please to continue to daven for Daniel Shimon ben Sharon, amongst all the Nedarim B'Shvoyim and all the Midat Tfilot, and Yisrut, Teshuvah, Tfilah, and Tzedakah. I just want to say to all those viewers from around the world, I just want to declare that meaning in any way to be judgmental of people who've gone home. Going home in many families is the right thing for them, and I'm the last person to judge, and it's totally understandable. There's no right and wrong. Families have to decide what's right for them. The main thing for me is not about whether you're here or there, it's that wherever you are, we are one people, and as one people, we need to do everything we can for our people, and sometimes maybe our greatest, the people who make the biggest difference in many countries, or people in those countries, especially the people with dual citizenship, and to do everything that we can wherever we are to serve Hashem, to have an Avat Israel, an Avat Israel, Avat Torah Israel, and do everything we can, Bezrat Hashem, to stand up as one people, because I think when we stand together as one, there's very little that stands in our way. And the nod, I'd say one practical thing for me is just to try to be as non-judgmental as possible. To try and be, I'm trying in my own life, just to be non-judgmental. Even if I've got kindness on people, to do it from a place of non-judgment, of kindness, of empathy, of humility. Not to be pacifist and not to be self-effacing in that you don't, everything that everyone does to you is fine. No, it's sometimes people, you feel trampled in something you need to state, but do it with humility, do it with kindness, do it with empathy, and treat other people the way we would like to be treated. And Bezrat Hashem, in the sweat of our achdut and our hava and our Quran, our togetherness, we will please God, see miracles which are unimaginable, and all the best.